means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and there's a lot of confusion around it. Since I was largely the person responsible for defining that term while I was a Gartner analyst, I thought it was only appropriate for me to share what I'm about to share with you today and kind of revisit this idea of augmented MDM and augmented data management, for that matter. There's augmented all sorts of things, at least through a Gartner lens. There's augmented data quality, there's augmented data integration, there's augmented MDM, and it all falls into this bigger balloon of augmented data management. Anyway, so for today, we're going to talk about MDM, but given the definition I'm about to give you, you could easily apply that into other data management areas as well. So what is augmented MDM? It's pretty simple and it's pretty high level, and you're going to see a bit of a catch-all definition here. And that definition, at least through the lens of Gartner, was kind of a catch-all by design. And you'll see why. Augmented MDM is really simply the application of new technologies such as graph, AI, ML, other more advanced, more, shall we say, modern technologies in the service of MDM to add additional layers of insight and automation and scalability into an MDM program. At a high level, that's it. So there's no kind of mystery here. All this is there's a bunch of new technologies out there, primarily graph, AI, ML. And yes, it annoys some people when AI and ML are lumped together. I know they are separate things, but for a 4-minute conversation, bear with me. These are new technologies out there, primarily graph, AI, ML, maybe a few others, maybe quantum. I think you could maybe throw into that to the degree that it would ever be used from a data management perspective down the road. But there are these new technologies out there that are slightly disruptive, that are adding kind of layers of scale and automation like we've really never seen before in the data management space. And vendors are getting their hands around this and their arms around this and how to integrate these capabilities. And data practitioners are trying to figure out how to integrate these capabilities into their data management programs. It's new, it's novel. So we said, hey, there's this thing, it deserves attention. Vendors need to be thinking about this. Vendors need to be integrating these capabilities into their solutions, and the market needs to be able to figure out how to leverage and drive business value from those solutions. Why does it matter? Why does augmented MDM and why does augmented data management matter? By the way, guys, you could say augmented data quality. It's the application of AI, ML, graph, other new technologies into the data quality realm, so on and so forth. So that's why it's a fairly generic and general definition, so it can be used in multiple contexts. Why does it matter? Well, it matters because these new technologies are really kind of pressing the boundary of traditional data management. And they really matter because of the benefits they can drive to stakeholders. Those benefits are largely in the form of additional insights, additional value, and scalability and automation. So insights, scalability, automation. Automation and scalability kind of go hand in hand, I understand that. But the ability to use these technologies to see things in data that you didn't know were there, to understand, from an MDM perspective, to understand a relationship that is a highly relevant relationship that you didn't otherwise know about, right? Where you could apply kind of augmented data management against large troves of transactional data to understand relationships that are meaningful through the lens of MDM that you may not have been managing as master data. The example I always give is a family relationship between two separate consumer entities that you didn't think were related, but you run a graph, you find out, lo and behold, they are related. There's a family relationship there that wasn't being tracked as a part of some sort of hierarchy for those people or for that organization. That's a great example of leveraging augmented MDM, in this case, graph, to run a graph to understand things that you didn't otherwise know about. So it does matter here because the insights can be really compelling and incredibly valuable for your end users or for your internal stakeholders. One of the things to keep in mind here about augmented MDM is that MDM, when I'm talking about augmented MDM, I'm mixing kind of two things together. I'm talking about technology, and then I'm talking about what is first and foremost a discipline. MDM is first and foremost a discipline. It's a way of managing data. It is a software solution second. So you need to keep that in mind when talking about augmented MDM here, because augmentation to drive value for an MDM program does not have to happen in an MDM hub. This is really, really important to keep in mind here, because for the longest time, MDM had some, as a technology, had some relatively consistent and definable boundaries about what was master data and what was not. What data is widely shared across the organization? What data needs consistent structure and governance and hierarchies and ontologies and all these things? What is MDM and what isn't? And there was a relatively well-defined boundary there. And what we see happening is that those boundaries are starting to blur. For example, the example I just gave about a relationship that could be meaningful from an MDM perspective was only derived by looking at data that is not master data, that is transactional data. So that's the blurring that I'm talking about here. So augmented MDM, to drive value, to drive insights, to drive benefit for stakeholders, that the process, the augmentation process, the processing of data, whether it's transactional data or master data, doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily need to happen in an MDM hub. And I would argue a lot of the times it probably shouldn't, because bringing in that transactional data into an MDM hub, replicating that data, persisting that data, adds a lot of overhead into MDM related processes. So I wrote about this when I was a Gartner analyst. I called it a bit of a paradox, in that you can drive great insights and great value from an MDM perspective, but to do it in an MDM hub would create a lot of bloat in the system and potentially even slow it down. So what you're seeing here with augmented MDM is that there is these lines are blurring between what's done in an MDM and what's done outside of an MDM. Arguably, some of these augmentation processes should be happening outside of an MDM, but where MDM can benefit from it. I think this is one of the reasons why you're seeing a lot of vendors try to find ways to kind of expand MDM into other data management use cases like profiling and discovery in particular, because you could run some profiles or discover these things running augmented processes that could be very meaningful from an MDM perspective, and frankly, vice versa. So keep in mind, when we're talking about augmented MDM, we are really, really talking about an augmented business process first and an augmented technology second. So with that in mind, what really kind of does the future look like here? Well, it's interesting. There was a lot of hubbub created in the recent Gartner data and analytics hype cycle, where the data mesh was marked as obsolete. That created quite a flap online, and particularly for the mesh acolytes. And what that really means is that it's not obsolete now, but that the data mesh will become obsolete before it reaches maturity, before it reaches what Gartner calls the plateau of productivity. That could be 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now. So I did the exact same thing with augmented MDM. I marked it as obsolete before plateau, because what I believe and what I would argue is that all of the existing critical capabilities of MDM, things like data governance, things like data integration, maybe even things like workflow, but the existing critical capabilities of MDM, at least as how Gartner defines them, and generally the market writ large defines them, I would argue that all of those processes will eventually integrate augmented capabilities to them, where there won't be a line to say, nobody will be able to say, well, there's an augmented process over here and there's a non-augmented process here. Everything will just be augmented. That's what I meant by having augmented MDM be, obsolete before plateau, because I think that ultimately it'll just become the way that we do things from a technology perspective and a business management perspective. AI will be applied everywhere where the use cases call for it. Machine learning will be applied again when use cases call for it, and it won't be this unique, novel thing that is worthy of its own critical capability, of its own evaluation criteria if you're an MDM vendor. That eventually augmentation will just get weaved into the fabric of MDM, and it'll be business as usual. So that was really kind of my thinking from the perspective of marking augmented MDM as obsolete. It's certainly not obsolete now, and it won't be ever, I would argue. I think it's just going to be the way we do business in the future, both from MDM as a discipline perspective and MDM as a technology perspective. So at a high level, guys, that's it for augmented MDM. There's no secret sauce here. It's just really leveraging new technologies, new capabilities to drive additional layers of insight and additional layers of scalability for MDM programs through added layers of automation around data management. So That's it for today's MDM Bytes. I hope you got some value from this short conversation. I look forward to seeing you in another episode sometime very soon.